So picture a world-class marathoner at like mile 20. We've all seen the footage of
Right,
it.
yeah, the classic bonk.
Exactly. They are in absolute peak physical condition, but suddenly their form just completely falls apart. Their legs turn to, well, concrete. Their eyes glaze over, and they just collapse on the asphalt.
It's hard to watch.
It really is. But here is the wildest part of that whole scenario. At the exact moment they hit the pavement, that athlete likely still has literally tens of thousands of calories of pure fat stored in their body.
Right, in their adipose tissue.
Yeah. Enough stored energy to theoretically run for days without stopping, yet their body acts like the fuel tank is just completely bone dry.
Right.
Because the human engine doesn't just, run out of gas, it actually actively locks itself out of the fuel tank.
It's honestly one of the most fascinating paradoxes in human physiology. I mean, we have this massive, dense reservoir of potential energy, but under the extreme duress of high-intensity output, the cellular machinery simply refuses, or rather, it's biochemically unable to process it fast enough. Yeah, you're basically watching the highly intelligent, highly manipulable metabolic ecosystem trying to protect itself.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. If you're listening to this on your commute to the gym or, sipping a post-run coffee, you're about to look at your workout in a completely different way.
Absolutely.
Today, our mission is to really bridge that gap between the microscopic sports biochemistry and the actual practical decisions you make about fueling your body. We're going to decode exactly how your muscles select fuels, why your gut revolts during a hard run, and how to spot nutritional pseudoscience from a mile away.
And to do this, we're leaning heavily on a really phenomenal foundational resource. It's the comprehensive lecture notes from a university course, SMSS 304, Nutrition and Sport Performance.
Yeah, developed by Dr. Helena Nati.
Right. Her curriculum is just a masterclass in taking complex cellular energy systems and, applying them to real athletic counseling.
It's a total goldmine. And to kind of flesh out the latest molecular research alongside that, we're augmenting Dr. Neti's notes with a really compelling special issue from the MDPI journal Nutrients.
Specifically the one on exercise and the microbiome, right?
Yes, exactly. And we're also pulling from the definitive joint position statement from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Dietitians of Canada, and the American College of Sports Medicine.
Which is a mouthful, so we'll just refer to it as the ACSM statement moving forward.
Good call. So by layering Dr. Nati's foundational physiology with those clinical guidelines from the ACSM and the cutting-edge microbiology from MDPI, we get this incredibly complete, high-resolution picture of the athletic body.
It's a really comprehensive look.
So let's jump straight into those cellular engines. I want to go back to that marathoner on the pavement, or, even just you doing a heavy deadlift in the gym. Dr. Nati's notes break down our metabolic engines into three primary energy systems.
Right, the first being the phosphagen system.
The absolute highest gear. It relies on adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, and phosphocreatine. But let's actually look at what that means. What is literally happening inside the muscle fiber when I pick up a heavy barbell?
Okay, so let's visualize the ATP molecule. You have an adenosine backbone, and it's attached to a tail of 3 phosphate groups.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And those phosphates are held together by incredibly high-energy chemical bonds. So when your brain sends an electrical signal to your muscle fiber to contract, an enzyme called ATPase rushes in and violently cleaves off that 3rd phosphate group.
So it's breaking a physical bond.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the breaking of that specific chemical bond releases a localized burst of kinetic energy. That burst is what physically allows the myosin heads inside your muscle fibers to grab onto the actin filament and ratchet forward.
Which is the actual muscle contraction.
Right. The problem is you only store enough readily available ATP in your muscles for about 2 to 3 seconds of maximal effort.
Wait, hold on. If I only have 2 seconds of ATP, how do Olympic sprinters make it through a 10-second 100-meter dash without just freezing up mid-stride?
That's where the second half of the phosphagen system kicks in, phosphocreatine. See, when ATP loses that 3rd phosphate, it becomes ADP adenosine diphosphate.
Like a dead battery.
Essentially, yes,
Huh.
a dead battery. But your muscles store a backup compound called phosphocreatine, and an enzyme called creatine kinase immediately steps in, rips the phosphate off the creatine and slams it back onto the dead ADP.
Instantly recharging it back to ATP.
Precisely. It's incredibly fast.
So phosphocreatine is like a molecular battery charger,
Yeah.
just rapidly refreshing the ATP pool in real time.
It is. But even with that rapid recharging mechanism, the phosphocreatine pool is incredibly small. The entire process, this violently explosive, purely anaerobic pathway that requires zero oxygen, it maxes out at about 10 to 15 seconds.
Wow, that's fast.
Yeah, and after that, the tank is empty. The creatine needs several minutes of rest to replenish. This biochemical reality is exactly why powerlifters have to sit on a bench for like 5 minutes between heavy sets.
Because if they try to lift again after 30 seconds, the cellular battery is still dead.
Exactly.
So if I'm playing a sport that demands more than a 15-second burst,
Yeah.
say I'm pushing through a grueling 400-meter sprint on the track,
Hmm.
my body has to shift the metabolic burden, right? It has to find a new way to synthesize ATP.
Right, which brings us to the second engine, the anaerobic glycolytic system.
Okay, let's get into that.
So the anaerobic glycolytic system is where things get slightly more complex. You've exhausted your instant phosphocreatine reserves. Your body still desperately needs ATP, and it still doesn't have time to wait for oxygen to be delivered to the cells.
Right.
So it turns to stored carbohydrates, specifically glycogen stored within the muscle itself or glucose circulating in the blood.
And glycolysis literally means the splitting of sugar.
Exactly. Through a cascade of 10 different enzymatic reactions in the cell's cytoplasm, a 6-carbon glucose molecule is systematically ripped in half to form 2 molecules of pyruvate.
And what's the payoff for that?
This process nets you 2 freshly minted ATP molecules. It's slower than the phosphagen system, obviously, but it provides the bulk of your energy for intense efforts lasting from about 15 seconds up to maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
But there's a heavy cost to this system, right? Because everyone knows that feeling at the end of a 400-meter sprint or like a heavy set of 20 squats. Your legs are literally burning. People always blame lactic acid for that burning sensation. Is that what's actually happening?
You know, the lactic acid narrative is actually one of the most persistent misunderstandings in sports science.
Wait, really?
Yeah. When you split that glucose molecule so rapidly without oxygen, the byproduct, pyruvate, needs somewhere to go. To keep the glycolytic engine running, the body converts that pyruvate into a molecule called lactate.
Okay, so lactate is there.
It is, but lactate itself isn't the enemy. In fact, your heart and brain love to use lactate as a fuel, and your liver can actually recycle it back into fresh glucose.
If the lactate isn't the enemy, what is causing that agonizing burn that forces me to stop running?
It's the hydrogen ions.
Hydrogen ions.
Yeah. The rapid splitting of ATP during this intense effort releases a massive accumulation of acidic hydrogen ions into the muscle cell. This drastically drops the pH of your muscle, making it highly acidic.
Oh, wow.
And that acidic environment literally interferes with calcium's ability to bind to the muscle fibers. It physically prevents the muscle from contracting. The burn is the severe drop in pH.
That is fascinating. So the muscle is essentially suffocating in its own metabolic exhaust.
That's a great way to put it.
Which means if we want to keep moving continuously, like if we want to transition from a 400-meter sprint to a 10-mile run, we have to shift gears again. We have to clear that exhaust and move to a sustainable pathway.
And that brings us to the aerobic system. Unlike the first two, the aerobic engine is entirely dependent on oxygen. Instead of just splitting glucose in half in the cytoplasm, the cell takes that byproduct, pyruvate, and shuttles it deep into the mitochondria, the actual powerhouses of the cell.
Through the Krebs cycle, right?
Exactly, through the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. Here, oxygen acts as the final electron acceptor.
So instead of netting a measly 2 ATP from glycolysis, what do we get when we run glucose all the way through the mitochondria with oxygen?
You get a massive payoff. The complete aerobic oxidation of a single glucose molecule yields around 32 ATP.
That is a huge jump.
It is incredibly efficient. And what's more, the aerobic system doesn't just burn glucose. It is the only system capable of burning fat.
Okay, here we go.
When you oxidize a single triglyceride, the fat molecule, you don't get 32 ATP. You can yield upwards of 100 to 120 ATP.
Okay, let's really unpack this fuel selection because Dr. Intinia's notes point out that this isn't a passive process at all. We used to think that fuel burning was just like throwing whatever was available into a furnace, but the notes highlight a mind-bending level of crosstalk between fats and carbohydrates inside the cell.
It really is mind-bending. It's a highly intelligent, regulated process known as the Randall cycle, or substrate competition.
Substrate competition.
Yeah. Your muscles are constantly making micro-decisions based on the intracellular environment. For example, if you have a high concentration of free fatty acids circulating in your bloodstream, they enter the muscle cell and go through a process called beta oxidation.
Okay.
And the specific byproducts of burning that fat actually act as biological stop signs. They chemically inhibit the enzymes responsible for breaking down glucose.
Wait, so burning fat literally shuts the door on burning carbohydrates?
Yes, high lipid availability directly downregulates carbohydrate metabolism. And the reverse is true, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you drink a massive sugary sports drink right before a light jog, your blood glucose spikes.
Mhm.
Your pancreas releases insulin to shuttle that sugar into the cells. That insulin spike completely blunts lipolysis, the breakdown of fat.
So the sugar takes priority.
Exactly. The high availability of glucose forces the cell to preferentially oxidize carbohydrates, completely halting your body's ability to tap into its fat stores.
This changes everything about how we view a pre-workout snack. But how is the cell actually controlling what gets inside the mitochondria? The notes mentioned the discovery of specific transport proteins.
This was a major paradigm shift in sports biochemistry. Fat doesn't just float into the mitochondria by accident. We discovered transport proteins, specifically ones called FATCD36 and CPT1.
Okay.
Think of them as highly exclusive bouncers at a nightclub. In a resting state, or when insulin is high, the CD36 transporters stay hidden deep inside the cell. But when you start exercising aerobically and your body demands fat for fuel, these transport proteins physically migrate to the cell membrane.
To grab the fat.
Exactly, to grab circulating fatty acids and literally drag them inside.
So fuel selection is an active physical sorting process happening millions of times a second. I love visualizing that. But I want to circle back to my very first question from the intro.
The marathoner.
Yeah, the marathoner. If the aerobic system has access to tens of thousands of fat calories, and it yields 120 ATP per molecule, why does the marathoner hit the wall? If fat is this endless, super dense fuel source, why do they collapse?
It all comes down to the rate of ATP synthesis. Think of fat like a massive, dense log of oak, and carbohydrates like crumpled up newspaper.
Oh, I like that analogy.
The oak log holds a tremendous amount of total heat energy, right? But it takes a very long time to catch fire and burn. The newspaper flashes bright and hot instantly.
That makes perfect sense. The biochemical process of beta oxidation and running fat through the mitochondria requires vastly more oxygen and involves many more enzymatic steps than burning glucose.
Precisely. Fat simply cannot synthesize ATP rapidly enough to meet the demands of higher intensity efforts. If you are operating at around 60 to 70% of your VO2 max, a moderate running pace, your muscle absolutely requires the fast-burning newspaper of glucose oxidation to bridge the gap.
So what happens at mile 20?
When a marathoner hits the wall at mile 20, they haven't run out of energy overall. They have depleted their stored muscle and liver glycogen.
They ran out of newspaper.
Exactly. And they are left staring at the giant oak log of body fat. The body is forced to rely almost entirely on fat oxidation. And because the biochemical kinetics of fat burning are so slow, the athlete's pace drops drastically.
That's where it steps in.
Yes. The brain perceives this impending failure and initiates a central fatigue cascade. Your legs turn to concrete because your central nervous system is forcing you to slow down to perfectly match the speed of your cellular fat metabolism.
That is profound.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a failure of willpower. It's a hard biochemical speed limit.
Right.
And knowing that speed limit exists, you see athletes obsessing over ways to hack it. Which leads us to the ACSM's discussion on train low strategies, the idea of deliberately training with low carbohydrate availability.
The physiological theory behind train low is really fascinating. The idea is that by intentionally withholding carbohydrates, maybe doing a long morning run fasted, or eating a strict high-fat diet, you place the muscle cell under severe metabolic stress.
You're forcing it to use the fat.
You're forcing it to rely on fat. And the body responds to this stress by upregulating the DNA transcription of those specific fat-transporting proteins we talked about, like CD36. You grow denser mitochondrial networks. You are literally building a bigger biological engine to burn fat faster.
You're trying to turn that oak log into kindling.
That's the goal. You delay the point at which you need to dip into your precious glycogen stores, potentially pushing the wall from mile 20 to mile 26.
But I'm looking at the evidence analysis library.
Yeah.
The EAL data cited in the ACSM paper, and it seems to throw a massive wrench in this entire philosophy.
It does. The EAL data reveals the fatal flaw in the train low paradigm. While we definitely see those structural adaptations at a cellular level under a microscope, they do not consistently translate to improved race day performance.
Wow.
The reason comes back to the energy systems. Without adequate carbohydrates, your anaerobic glycolytic system is severely handicapped.
Because you can't access that high gear.
Exactly. When you train low, you physically cannot push the intensity of your workouts as high. If you try to do a grueling track session with no glycogen, you will fail. Therefore, the overall mechanical and cardiovascular stimulus of the training block is much lower.
So you're making compromises.
Right, you might build an engine that is highly efficient at burning fat, but it's a smaller, slower engine overall because you couldn't train hard enough to build top-end power. The EAL guidelines suggest a much more nuanced approach.
Which is what?
Training low occasionally for metabolic flexibility, but always ensuring high carbohydrate availability for high-intensity key performance sessions.
Let's ground all this invisible cellular activity into a real-world scenario from Dr. Ninny's notes. Think about a midfielder in a professional soccer match.
Perfect example.
They are constantly traversing the massive pitch. When the ball is on the other side of the field and they are just lightly jogging to maintain their spatial formation, they are operating entirely in that aerobic system, oxidizing a mix of fat and blood glucose. The oxygen is plentiful.
Right. Then there's a sudden turnover. The midfielder identifies a gap and makes a violent, explosive 30-yard sprint to receive a pass. The demand for ATP instantly skyrockets beyond what oxygen can provide.
So the phosphagen system takes over,
Yeah.
ATPase cleaves the ATP, phosphocreatine rushes in to recharge it, they get to the ball.
But immediately, two defenders collapse on them. The play devolves into a grueling 90-second intense battle for possession, full of rapid directional changes, shoving, and short bursts of acceleration.
The phosphocreatine pool is drained. The anaerobic glycolytic system engages. The muscle starts furiously splitting glycogen. Pyruvate floods the cytoplasm, converting to lactate, and those acidic hydrogen ions start dropping the tissue pH.
And if that midfielder started the game with suboptimal glycogen stores because of, say, poor dietary choices the day before, their anaerobic engine stalls out right there.
They lack the fast-burning fuel.
Exactly. Their legs feel heavy, their reaction time stutters by half a second, and the defender easily strips the ball.
That perfectly bridges the gap.
Right.
We spent a lot of time on the microscopic engines. Now we need to talk about how to actually put the right fuel onto the dinner plate.
Right.
This moves us from biochemistry to the foundational principles of energy balance and macronutrient strategy outlined by Dr. Ninty and the ACSM.
And the absolute bedrock of sports nutrition is total daily energy expenditure. Before we even look at carbohydrates or proteins, we have to establish the overall energy economy of the athlete.
We measure this energy in kilocalories. And the concept seems almost insultingly simple, right? Calories in versus calories out. But Dr. Ninty breaks down energy expenditure into three very distinct physiological buckets.
It's vital to separate them. The first bucket is your basal metabolic rate, or BMR. If you are lying in a hospital bed in a coma, in a temperature-controlled room, completely motionless, your body still burns a massive amount of energy just to maintain a heartbeat, inflate your lungs, and keep your ion channels functioning.
And how much of our energy goes to that?
BMR accounts for roughly 60 to 70% of a normal person's daily expenditure.
And how do we calculate that without putting someone in a laboratory metabolic chamber?
Clinicians use predictive algorithms. The most notable is the Harris-Benedict equation, or for athletes, the Cunningham equation. These formulas weigh variables like age, height, and total body mass.
But why is the Cunningham equation preferred for athletes?
Because of the critical variable, fat-free mass. Muscle tissue is incredibly metabolically active compared to adipose tissue. The more muscle mass you carry, the higher your BMR, even at complete rest.
Okay, the second bucket is the thermic effect of food, or TPF. This is fascinating to me. We actually burn calories just to digest the calories we eat.
Yes, the mechanical and chemical breakdown of food requires ATP. Your stomach churning, the secretion of enzymes, the active transport of nutrients across the intestinal wall. It's not free.
Does the type of food matter?
Absolutely. Protein has the highest thermic effect. It takes significantly more energy to break down complex amino acid chains than it does to absorb a simple sugar.
And the final bucket is the thermic effect of activity, or TEA, which obviously includes your 5-mile run or your hour of lifting weights. But Dr. Needy's notes place a huge emphasis on a subcategory here, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT.
NEAT is the hidden variable that ruins so many generic diet plans. NEAT encompasses all the physical movement you do that isn't planned exercise.
Like what?
Tapping your foot, walking to the mailbox, gesturing with your hands while you talk, standing at your desk. For a construction worker, NEAT might burn 2,000 calories a day. For a sedentary office worker, it might be 200.
And what's wild is how the brain subconsciously modulates NEAT to protect energy stores. If you aggressively cut your calories to lose weight, your brain senses the deficit and subconsciously stops you from fidgeting.
Right.
You feel lethargic. You take the elevator instead of the stairs. Your body sabotages your energy expenditure to survive.
Which is exactly why for athletes, energy balance is never merely about stepping on a scale to manage weight. It is fundamentally about ensuring sufficient energy availability to support complex physiological functions.
This is a huge concept in the ACSM Guidelines Energy Availability, or EA. It's calculated by taking your total dietary intake, subtracting the energy you burn during your planned exercise, and dividing that number by your fat-free mass.
Put simply, after you have paid the massive caloric tax of your 2-hour track workout, how many calories are actually left over in the bloodstream to keep your brain, your immune system, your bones, and your reproductive organs functioning?
When that leftover number drops too low, an athlete falls into low energy availability, or LEA. And the physiological cascade that follows is terrifying.
It is a severe survival response. The hypothalamus in the brain is constantly monitoring circulating energy hormones, particularly leptin, which is secreted by fat cells. When leptin levels plummet due to extreme caloric deficits, the hypothalamus sounds the alarm.
What does it do?
It starts aggressively shutting down non-essential physiological systems to preserve energy for the brain and the heart.
And in the context of human survival, reproduction is a luxury.
Exactly. The hypothalamus suppresses the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. This triggers a massive downstream disruption of the entire hypothalamic-pituitary-gonadal axis.
So hormones just crash.
Luteinizing hormone drops, estrogen drops, testosterone drops. In female athletes, this classically presents as amenorrhea, the complete loss of the menstrual cycle. But male athletes are equally susceptible. Their testosterone plummets, destroying their ability to recover and build muscle.
This progresses into a clinical syndrome that the ACSM defines as relative energy deficiency in sport, or RDS.
RDS is a systemic failure. Beyond the hormonal collapse, we see extreme immune suppression leading to constant respiratory infections. But perhaps the most devastating impact is on bone health.
Oh, so...
Estrogen and testosterone are critical for regulating the balance between osteoblasts, the cells that build bone, and osteoclasts, the cells that break bone down. In a state of RDAS, osteoclast activity dominates.
Oh, no.
The body actually begins resorbing its own skeleton to scavenge calcium and energy. The athlete develops osteopenia, leading to catastrophic stress fractures that can end careers.
The stakes are incredibly high, so step 1 is absolutely ensuring we hit total daily energy targets to avoid RDS. Step 2 is organizing where those calories come from. Let's dive into the macronutrients, starting with the undisputed king of high-intensity performance, carbohydrates.
The clinical consensus from Dr. Nini's notes is clear. Carbohydrates are non-negotiable for glycolytic athletes, but we have to differentiate the source. The foundation should be complex carbohydrates, oats, quinoa, brown rice, legumes, and starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes.
And biochemically, why are these preferred for daily meals?
Because of their molecular structure. Complex carbs are long, intricate chains of glucose molecules heavily bound with dietary fiber. When you eat them, your digestive enzymes have to work hard to slowly cleave those chains apart.
So it takes time.
Right. This results in a slow, sustained trickle of glucose into the bloodstream, avoiding massive spikes in insulin and providing stable energy for hours. They also deliver essential micronutrients and antioxidants required for cellular repair.
But I'm looking at the notes, and there is absolutely a time and a place for simple, highly refined carbohydrates. Honey, maple syrup, commercial sports gels, and even refined white bread. In diet culture, those are often demonized as toxic, but in sports nutrition, they are performance tools.
They are tactical weapons.
Right.
When you are 45 minutes into a grueling endurance event, your muscle glycogen is depleting fast. If you eat a bowl of high-fiber oatmeal at that moment, it will sit in your stomach like a rock because your gut doesn't have the blood flow to digest complex fiber.
You need sugar in your bloodstream immediately.
Exactly. Simple carbohydrates lack fiber. They digest almost instantly across the intestinal wall, providing rapid exogenous glucose to fuel that anaerobic glycolytic engine without causing gastrointestinal distress.
It's all about matching the fuel delivery speed to the engine's metabolic demand. Next is protein, the structural bedrock.
Unlike carbs or fat, protein is not primarily an energy source. The body avoids burning it for ATP unless under severe starvation. Its role is structural.
Right, repairing tissue.
When an athlete trains hard, they are physically tearing the ultrastructure of their muscle fibers. Dietary protein provides the amino acids required to rebuild those fibers thicker and stronger. But it's also vital for synthesizing enzymes, peptide hormones like insulin, and immune system antibodies.
The notes emphasize complete protein sources that contain all 9 essential amino acids that the human body cannot synthesize itself. Animal sources like whey, chicken, beef, fish, and eggs are naturally complete and highly bioavailable. But Dr. Nati's curriculums ensures plant-based athletes aren't left behind, focusing on complementary plant proteins.
Right. A single plant source, like black beans, might be low in the amino acid methionine, but rice is high in methionine and low in lysine. By combining them, rice and beans, you create a complete essential amino acid profile.
Interest puzzle pieces.
Yeah. Soy products like tofu and edamame are also incredible, as soy is one of the few plant sources that is nearly perfectly complete on its own.
And lastly, fats. At 9 kilocalories per gram, they are the most calorically dense macronutrient.
While saturated fats from animals should be moderated, Dr. Enteki highlights the massive physiological benefits of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. Monounsaturated fats from olive oil and avocados support robust cardiovascular health. But the polyunsaturated fats, specifically omega-3 fatty acids found in wild-caught salmon, chia seeds, and walnuts, are critical for athletes.
Why omega-3s specifically?
Because intense exercise causes systemic inflammation and massive oxidative stress. Omega-3 fatty acids physically incorporate themselves into the phospholipid bilayer of your cell membranes.
They become part of the cell.
Yes. Once there, they replace inflammatory precursors like arachidonic acid, actively downregulating the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. They literally cool the inflammatory fire of hard training, accelerating recovery. They are also vital for the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are crucial for bone health and vision.
Let me jump in and push back on something. I hear this argument constantly in fitness circles, the idea that a calorie is a calorie.
Oh, that old debate.
Right. If the laws of thermodynamics dictate that my body weight is determined purely by total energy balance, and let's say my daily expenditure is exactly 3,000 calories, if I eat 3,000 calories worth of glazed donuts versus 3,000 calories of wild-caught salmon, quinoa, and broccoli, won't my body weight remain exactly the same? Why does the macronutrient source matter if the energy total is identical?
It's a classic reductionist argument. The fundamental truth is this. Total calories dictate your mass, but your macronutrient composition dictates your function, body composition, and adaptive response.
Expand on that. Walk me through the donut diet.
If you hit your 3,000 calorie limit purely with donuts, yes, your scale weight will remain perfectly stable. You won't gain or lose a pound. But let's look under the hood. Donuts are almost entirely simple sugars and saturated fats, with virtually zero protein. First, you are entirely depriving your body of the essential amino acids needed to repair the micro tears in your muscles.
Okay.
The cellular signaling pathway called mTOR, which initiates muscle protein synthesis, remains dormant because it requires the amino acid leucine to activate.
So my muscles are damaged from the workout, but I have sent no building materials to fix them.
Exactly. So your body, desperate for amino acids to maintain vital organ function, begins catabolizing breaking down your existing muscle tissue. Meanwhile, the massive influx of simple sugars repeatedly spikes your insulin, which actively drives the fat from the donuts into your adipose tissue.
That sounds like a disaster.
It is. Over a period of weeks, your scale weight hasn't changed, but you have lost 5 pounds of metabolically active muscle and gained 5 pounds of inflammatory body fat. Your VO2 max drops. Your power output plummets. Your immune system crashes because it lacks protein to make antibodies. A calorie is not just energy. A calorie is biological information.
That is a phenomenal breakdown. And the ACSM guidelines highlight exactly how powerful this biological information is, particularly regarding protein during a caloric deficit.
Yes. When an athlete is actively trying to cut weight, perhaps a wrestler moving down a weight class, they are in a hypocaloric state. As we just discussed, the body's natural response to a deficit is to scavenge tissue for energy, and muscle is highly expendable.
Right.
The ACSM emphasizes that by aggressively increasing daily protein intake to up to 2.4 grams per kilogram of body weight during this deficit, the continuous presence of circulating amino acids signals the body to spare the lean muscle tissue and preferentially oxidize stored body fat.
And timing is a crucial variable here. The notes describe the anabolic window, which used to be thought of as this magical 30-minute period post-workout. While that window is actually much wider than we thought, there is still a massive mechanistic benefit to post-exercise protein.
The muscle fiber is highly sensitized after mechanical tension. Consuming 20 to 30 grams of high-quality, leucine-rich protein within a few hours of exercise maximizes the amplitude of that mTOR signaling pathway, dramatically accelerating the rate of muscle protein synthesis compared to eating that same protein 12 hours later.
This level of precision leads directly into one of the most powerful tools in Dr. Nontiti's curriculum, carbohydrate periodization. The idea that your diet shouldn't be static from day to day.
Nutrition must be as dynamic as the training itself. The concept is fuel for the work required. The ACSM guidelines show that on a light recovery day, an athlete might only need 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight to support basal function and top off glycogen slowly.
Makes sense.
But if that same athlete has an exhausting 4-hour high-intensity training session the next day, their requirement rockets up to 8 to 12 grams per kilogram. For a 160-pound athlete, that is roughly 800 grams of carbohydrates. That is an astonishing volume of food.
To make this practical, Dr. Manti teaches the plate method. It's a visual heuristic. On that massive training day, you visualize your dinner plate. Fully half of that physical real estate should be buried under dense carbohydrates. Pasta, rice, potatoes. A quarter is lean protein and a quarter is vegetables. But on the recovery day,
The carbohydrate sector shrinks dramatically to just a quarter of the plate, making room for a massive increase in fibrous vegetables and healthy fats to manage inflammation. You are dynamically expanding and contracting the fuel tank based on the specific demands of the day.
okay, we've perfectly engineered the plate, the macros are dialed, but eating the optimal food is completely irrelevant if your body can't actually process it. The food has to pass through a dark, highly sensitive biological tollway before it ever reaches the muscle. This takes us away from traditional sports nutrition and plunges us into the world of microbiology. Let's talk about the gut microbiome and the nightmare that is runner's tummy.
The gastrointestinal tract is the great bottleneck of athletic performance. And according to the MDPI nutrient special issue, it is vastly more complex than just a tube that absorbs sugar. Your gut is home to trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, that operate as an incredibly influential endocrine and immune organ.
The NDPI review highlights a mind-bending fact. Elite athletes possess a fundamentally different microbial landscape than sedentary people. And the craziest part, it isn't just because athletes eat better diets. The physical act of intense exercise physically alters the populations of bacteria in your intestines.
It's a breathtaking discovery. Let's look at the mechanism. When you run 40 miles a week, your core body temperature frequently rises. The transit time of food through your bowel speeds up. The biochemical environment of your colon changes.
So it's a completely different environment down there.
Yes. This unique high-stress environment actively selects for certain bacterial species. Specifically, endurance athletes show a massive enrichment of bacteria within the Firmicutes phylum.
Why do we care about the Firmicutes phylum? What makes them the MVP of the athlete's gut?
Because these specific bacteria are metabolic factories. When you eat complex carbohydrates with high amounts of resistant starch and fiber, the stuff human enzymes cannot digest, it passes untouched into the large intestine. The Firmicutes bacteria feast on this fiber, fermenting it.
And what do they produce?
The byproduct of this bacterial fermentation is a group of molecules called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
SCFAs are mentioned everywhere in the MDPI paper. What is their biological function?
The primary SCFA is called butyrate. Butyrate is practically a miracle molecule. First, it serves as the primary energy source for the colonocytes, the actual cells lining your intestinal wall. It keeps the gut barrier strong and impermeable.
Okay, so it protects the gut itself.
But then, the SCFAs enter systemic circulation. They act as potent signaling molecules. They bind to specific receptors on immune cells, drastically suppressing the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which accelerates muscle recovery.
Wait, there's more. The paper states that these fatty acids actually cross the blood-brain barrier?
They do. They interface directly with the central nervous system. SCFAs have been shown to modulate neuroinflammation and influence the synthesis of neurotransmitters. During a grueling ultramarathon, when central fatigue is setting in and the brain wants to quit, a robust supply of microbially produced SCFAs can theoretically blunt that mental fatigue and improve cognitive resilience.
So, to summarize, I eat a bowl of black beans, I can't digest the fiber, But the trillions of specialized bacteria that I've cultivated through running eat that fiber, and in return, they secrete a chemical cocktail that heals my gut, reduces my muscle soreness, and literally alters my brain chemistry to make me mentally tougher.
It is the ultimate symbiotic relationship. The host provides the mechanical stress and the fiber, and the microbiome provides the biochemical armor.
That is awe-inspiring. But as anyone who has ever run a marathon knows, the gut can also be your worst enemy. Despite this beautiful symbiosis, 30 to 50% of endurance athletes suffer from severe gastrointestinal distress. Nausea, intense cramping, vomiting, and diarrhea, the dreaded runner's tummy. What is physically causing this biological betrayal?
It is a severe physiological conflict of interest, driven by a phenomenon called gastrointestinal ischemia. When you are resting on the couch, your digestive organs receive a massive portion of your cardiac output. But when you start a high-intensity run, your working leg muscles demand extreme amounts of oxygen. Simultaneously, your skin demands extreme blood flow to sweat and dissipate heat.
There isn't enough blood to go around.
Exactly. The heart can only pump so much volume. So the sympathetic nervous system takes over. It triggers the release of norepinephrine, which aggressively constricts the splanchnic arteries, the blood vessels that feed your stomach and intestines. Blood flow to the gut can plummet by up to 80%.
The gut is effectively suffocating.
It is experiencing severe hypoxia, a lack of oxygen. Without adequate blood flow, the sweeping muscular contractions of the stomach called peristalsis grind to a halt. The microscopic villi lining the intestines begin to wither. Most dangerously, the tight junctions, the protein seals that hold the intestinal cells together to keep bad bacteria out, begin to fail. The gut becomes highly permeable. This is a leaky gut.
And what happens when the gut leaks?
Endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, from the cell walls of dying bacteria, slip through the broken barrier and directly enter the bloodstream. The immune system detects these toxins and triggers a massive systemic inflammatory response.
Which causes the symptoms.
Right. This rapid immune cascade is what causes the profound nausea, cramping, and immediate urge to evacuate the bowels. And here's the tragic irony. This ischemic shutdown happens at the exact moment the athlete is trying to force down 60 to 90 grams of thick, sugary sports gels every hour to fuel their anaerobic glycolytic engine.
It's a catastrophic traffic jam. The engine is screaming for sugar, but the tollway is closed, the toll booths are broken, and the sugar just sits in the stomach rotting.
Precisely. The highly concentrated sugar sits in the stagnant gut. Through the process of osmosis, that massive concentration of sugar actively pulls water out of the body and into the intestines, resulting in severe sloshing and inevitable osmotic diarrhea.
Okay, so how do we fix this? How does an athlete survive this physiological bottleneck? Dr. Nitti outlines specific mitigation strategies.
The first line of defense is preventative restriction. Dr. Nitti advises athletes to meticulously track their diet and identify trigger foods in the 24 to 48 hours before a race. Because the gut is going to lose blood flow, you want to empty the digestive tract as much as possible beforehand.
So lay off the fiber.
Yes. Aggressively reduce high-fiber foods, cruciferous vegetables, beans, and excessive fats before the starting gun. Furthermore, highly concentrated hypertonic sports drinks or extreme doses of caffeine right before the race can violently irritate the already stressed gut lining.
But the most fascinating strategy in the notes is the concept of training the gut. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I completely understand how progressive overload makes a bicep grow larger. But how do you train an intestine? Are my intestines getting thicker?
They aren't getting thicker, they're getting more chemically efficient. Let's look at the cellular level. When you consume a carbohydrate gel, the glucose doesn't just seep into your blood. It has to be actively carried across the intestinal wall by specific transport proteins.
Oh, like the bouncers we talked about earlier.
Exactly like that. The primary one for glucose is called SGLT1, a sodium glucose linked transporter. Think of SGLT1 like a revolving door.
Okay, I have a baseline number of these revolving doors in my gut.
Right. If you follow a low-carbohydrate diet, or if you only ever drink plain water during your training runs, your body conserves energy by down-regulating the expression of these SGLT1 transporters. You might only have 100 revolving doors available, so if you suddenly try to consume 90 grams of carbs on race day, those 100 doors get immediately overwhelmed.
The sugar backs up.
A massive crowd of sugar molecules is trapped in the lobby, causing all the osmotic diarrhea we just discussed.
But if I train the gut,
if you purposefully practice your race day nutrition during your training, if you consistently consume 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour during your long, hard runs over several weeks, You create a localized environment of high sugar concentration in the gut. The intestinal cells sense this constant influx.
And they adapt.
Yes, at the DNA level, they upregulate the transcription of SGLT1 proteins. They physically build more revolving doors. By race day, you might have 1,000 SGLT1 transporters operating, allowing you to rapidly clear massive amounts of sugar from the gut into the bloodstream before it has a chance to cause GI distress.
That is incredible. The gut literally adapts its architecture based on the specific fuel loads it faces during mechanical stress.
Yeah.
And if the gut and the microbiome are this adaptable, it makes me wonder where the future of sports nutrition is heading.
It opens up a revolutionary frontier. Currently, sports dietitians look at your body weight, your sport, and prescribe a macronutrient ratio. But 10 years from now, we will likely be taking a stool sample, sequencing an athlete's unique microbiome genome, and identifying exactly which firmicute strains they are lacking.
We'll be engineering the ecosystem.
Exactly. We will prescribe hyper-customized prebiotic fibers and probiotic bacterial strains to perfectly cultivate a personalized SCFA factory in their colon. We will treat the microbiome not as a byproduct of digestion, but as a primary trainable athletic organ designed to lower neuroinflammation and maximize oxygen efficiency.
I can't wait for that. Now, to pivot slightly, I want to look back at the ischemic gut. One of the main reasons the sympathetic nervous system has to aggressively shunt blood away from the gut to begin with is because total blood plasma volume is dropping. The athlete is losing water.
That's right.
If you lose water, the blood becomes thicker, the heart has to pump harder, and the peripheral organs suffocate. We have to talk about fluid mechanics.
Hydration is the invisible scaffolding that holds all these metabolic systems together. Water isn't just a passive liquid sloshing around. It is the universal solvent required for cellular respiration, the transport medium for nutrients and hormones, and critically, the primary coolant system for the human engine.
Let's lay out the practical clinical protocols first. Dr. Nantini's notes and the ACSM statement are very specific on how to prime the pump.
The goal before a race is to achieve euhydration, perfect fluid balance. The protocol dictates consuming 16 to 20 ounces of fluid roughly 1 to 2 hours before the event. The timing is crucial. It gives your kidneys ample time to process the fluid, absorb what is needed to maximize blood plasma volume, and void the excess as urine before you line up at the start.
And during the event.
The generic baseline is 4 to 8 ounces every 15 minutes, but as we will discuss in a moment, this is highly variable. Post-exercise is where athletes often fail. The clinical recommendation is to consume 20 to 24 ounces of fluid for every single pound of body weight lost during the session.
Wait, let me do the math. A pint of water is exactly 16 ounces, which weighs exactly 1 pound. If I lost 1 pound of sweat, why am I supposed to drink 24 ounces to replace it? I'm over-drinking by 150%.
Because the human body is not a perfectly sealed thermos. When you finish a hard workout, you don't instantly stop losing water. Your core temperature is still elevated, meaning you continue to sweat for hours. Furthermore, your kidneys are still producing obligatory urine.
So if I just drink the 16 ounces,
If you only drink 16 ounces to replace a 16-ounce loss, the ongoing sweat and urine production will immediately put you right back into a dehydrated state. You have to aggressively overshoot the deficit to achieve actual homeostasis.
let's explore the consequences of getting this wrong. What happens when an athlete starts sliding into dehydration? The notes mention that losing just 2% of your body mass in water triggers systemic failure.
It is a profound tipping point. For a 150-pound athlete, a 2% loss is just 3 pounds of sweat. That is incredibly easy to lose in a hot 60-minute run. But at that exact 2% threshold, we see a cascade of cardiovascular strain. As water leaves the blood plasma to form sweat, the total volume of your blood decreases. The blood literally becomes thicker, more viscous.
So the heart has a harder time pumping it.
Exactly. Stroke volume, the amount of blood the heart pushes out with one beat drops. To maintain the same delivery of oxygen to the working muscles, the heart rate has to artificially elevate. This is called cardiac drift.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah. You are running the exact same pace, but your heart rate is climbing 10, 15 beats per minute higher. Additionally, because blood volume is low, the body stops sending blood to the skin to preserve it for the muscles and brain.
Which means you stop sweating.
You stop sweating, your core temperature skyrockets, and you veer dangerously toward heat stroke. Mentally, the decreased blood flow to the brain causes a spike in perceived exertion. The run feels agonizingly hard, and motor recruitment falters.
Okay, dehydration is a nightmare. So the logical, intuitive solution, and the one that sports drink companies and fitness magazines have hammered into us for decades, is to drink as much water as humanly possible. Stay heady thirst. Carry a gallon jug everywhere. But the ACSM highlights a darker side to this hydration obsession.
It's arguably one of the most dangerous, well-intentioned myths in fitness. Blindly over-consuming plain water leads to a critical, potentially lethal condition called exercise-associated hyponatremia.
Let's break down the word hypo meaning low, natremia meaning blood sodium.
Exactly. Normal human blood sodium concentration is tightly regulated around 135 to 145 milliequivalents per liter. It's a delicate balance of water and dissolved electrolytes. When an athlete, often a slower, back-at-the-pack marathoner who stops at every single water station, drinks massive volumes of hypotonic plain water, they aren't just hydrating.
They're flooding the system.
They are actively diluting their bloodstream. The water volume increases, but the total amount of sodium remains the same, or is actively lost through sweat. The sodium concentration plummets below 135.
I visualize the body's cellular structure like a vast collection of sponges. A slightly damp sponge is perfect. It has structural integrity. A bone-dry sponge, like in severe dehydration, is rigid and useless. But a totally saturated sponge can't hold another drop. It just bloats and leaks. What happens at the cellular level when the blood becomes this dilute?
It triggers a catastrophic shift in osmotic pressure. Nature abhors a concentration gradient. Your cells have a specific internal concentration of sodium and potassium. When the blood outside the cells suddenly becomes incredibly dilute and watery, osmotic pressure forces that excess free water to rush into the cells to try and equalize the concentration.
The cells act like the sponge and soak it up.
And they rapidly swell. In your skeletal muscles, this rapid swelling causes profound weakness, cramping, and lethargy. But the true danger is when this dilute blood reaches the central nervous system. The astrocytes and neurons in the brain begin absorbing the water, and the brain tissue rapidly swells.
But the brain is encased in a rigid, inflexible bone skull. It has absolutely nowhere to expand.
Precisely. This condition is called cerebral edema. As the brain swells against the skull, intracranial pressure spikes massively. It compresses the brainstem, which controls basic life support functions.
That's terrifying.
It is. The athlete experiences severe confusion, throbbing headaches, vomiting, seizures, coma, and if not treated with hypertonic intravenous saline immediately, it can result in death. Hyponatremia is entirely preventable, yet it still claims lives because of the myth that more water is always better.
Which completely validates why Dr. Natria's curriculum leans so heavily on the sweat test. We have to throw out the generic 8 classes a day rule and replace it with highly individualized data. How does an athlete actually conduct a sweat test?
It's simple, but incredibly powerful. You weigh yourself completely nude, completely dry, immediately prior to a 1-hour training session at your race pace intensity. You record exactly how many fluid ounces you consumed during that hour. Immediately after the workout, you towel off all excess sweat and weigh yourself nude again.
And then just do the math.
By calculating the weight deficit and adding back the volume of fluid consumed, you determine your precise hourly sweat rate in that specific temperature and humidity.
But the volume of sweat is only half the equation, right? Because athletes don't just lose water, they lose vastly different amounts of sodium in that sweat.
The variance is staggering. The notes highlight that the sodium concentration in human sweat can range from a very dilute 500 milligrams per liter all the way up to an incredibly salty 2,000 milligrams per liter. It is genetically determined by the efficiency of the sodium channels in your sweat glands.
This perfectly explains why generic hydration advice is practically medical malpractice. Imagine an elite triathlete who sweats 2 liters an hour and loses 2,000 milligrams of sodium per liter. They are dumping 4,000 milligrams of sodium an hour onto the pavement.
Right.
If they try to replace that with plain water, they will dilute their blood and trigger hyponatremia almost instantly. They absolutely require a heavily concentrated, high-sodium hydration protocol.
Contrast that with a recreational jogger doing a 5K on a cool autumn morning. Their sweat rate is minimal, their sodium loss is negligible. If that jogger reads a magazine article about the elite triathlete and decides to preemptively drink a gallon of plain water before their 30-minute run, they are actively putting themselves in danger of hyponatremia. The sweat test proves that hydration must be a customized, data-driven prescription, not a blanket rule.
The sheer complexity of all this is staggering.
Yeah.
We're talking about manipulating enzymatic transport proteins for fat oxidation, periodizing hundreds of grams of carbohydrates to dodge REVS, mathematically calculating BMR and NEAT, systematically exposing the gut to high sugar loads to build SGLT1 transporters, and weighing naked to dial in osmotic fluid balance. To truly optimize human performance, you essentially need a degree in biochemistry.
It requires immense dedication, trial and error, and a willingness to understand cellular physiology.
And because it is so difficult, so painful, and so complex, human nature inevitably looks for a shortcut. The promise of a magic pill that can bypass the Krebs cycle and the gut microbiome entirely, which drags us directly into the dark, incredibly lucrative world of nutritional quackery.
It is the shadow industry of sports science. Dr. Natati's curriculum issues profound warnings regarding nutritional quackery. By definition, quackery is the aggressive promotion and sale of products, diets, supplements, or services that make exaggerated, false, or misleading claims about enhancing performance or accelerating fat loss, entirely without credible scientific substantiation.
I want to explore the psychology of this. Why is the sports world, a community supposedly dedicated to health and physical reality, so uniquely vulnerable to absolute pseudoscience?
It stems from the psychological pressure of elite competition. When you are operating at the pinnacle of human capability, the margin between a gold medal and fourth place is often measured in hundredths of a second or a fraction of a millimeter. Athletes are gripped by the desperate pursuit of the 1% edge.
They'll try anything.
If an opponent might be taking a supplement that provides even a theoretical fraction of an advantage, the psychological fear of missing out drives athletes to try anything, regardless of the evidence.
And the supplement industry knows exactly how to prey on that desperation. Especially because, at least in the United States, the regulatory environment is practically non-existent compared to pharmaceuticals.
This is a critical point regarding the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, or DSHEA. Under this legislation, dietary supplements are effectively regulated as food products, not as drugs. Before a pharmaceutical drug can be sold, the manufacturer must conduct years of rigorous, expensive, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials to prove to the FDA that it is both safe and effective.
But for a pre-workout powder.
The burden of proof is entirely reversed. The supplement manufacturer does not have to prove their product works. They barely have to prove it's safe. They can formulate a powder, slap a holographic label on it, and put it on store shelves immediately.
So the FDA just watches.
The FDA only acts post-market. It is up to the government to prove the supplement is inherently dangerous or contaminated after people have already consumed it. It's the Wild West.
Which means the burden of critical thinking falls entirely on the consumer. Dr. Intiad provides several glaring red flags to help the layperson spot quackery. The classic quick fix promises. The use of pseudoscientific buzzwords like proprietary cellular matrix or quantum absorption. Dramatic claims that refute decades of established consensus, claiming every other scientist is wrong. And the heavy reliance on celebrity testimonials instead of peer-reviewed data.
An endorsement from a charismatic bodybuilder on Instagram does not equate to a randomized controlled trial. A fundamental tenet of the ACSM's approach to assessing any ergogenic aid, a performance-enhancing substance, is demanding independent, double-blind, randomized controlled trials that demonstrate a clear biological mechanism of action. Furthermore, because the manufacturing is so loosely regulated, athletes must look for third-party auditing.
You mean checking for contamination?
Exactly. Studies have repeatedly shown that a shocking percentage of over-the-counter supplements are contaminated with heavy metals, unlisted prescription stimulants, or banned anabolic steroids, often due to dirty manufacturing equipment. Elite athletes rely on certifications like Informed Sport or ISO 14025 accreditation, which guarantees an independent laboratory has tested the exact batch to ensure what is on the label is actually in the bottle and nothing else.
Let me put you in a scenario. I'm standing in the supplement aisle at my local health food store. I pick up a tub of bright neon pre-workout powder. Right on the front, next to a picture of lightning bolts and a flexing bicep, there's a bold badge that says, "Research underway." Now, to a logical person, shouldn't that be a comforting sign? It implies that the company is actively engaging with the scientific method to validate their product.
It is perhaps the most brilliant, insidious marketing tactic in the industry. Research underway is a massive red flag. Because it is a legal sleight of hand, what that badge actually translates to is this. There is currently absolutely zero clinical evidence that our proprietary blend of herbs does anything at all. However, we have paid a small, unaccredited laboratory a nominal fee to conduct a poorly controlled, low sample size study. This allows us to use the illusion of the scientific process to legally market and sell you this unproven powder today while we wait for results that we will likely bury if they are negative. They are using the total absence of data as a feature, not a bug.
Wow. They weaponize the idea of science against the consumer. So how should an athlete actually approach supplementation if the industry is this murky?
The ACSM mandates a strict food-first philosophy. An athlete must prioritize meeting their macro and micronutrient demands through whole, nutrient-dense foods. Real food provides a complex, synergistic matrix of vitamins, minerals, and fibers that cannot be replicated in a pill. Supplements should only be utilized as highly targeted, specific tools to address confirmed clinical deficiencies or to supply evidence-based ergogenic aids that are difficult to consume in sufficient quantities through food alone.
And to be fair to the science, there are supplements that have survived the crucible of randomized controlled trials. There are compounds with robust, mechanism-based efficacy supported by the evidence analysis library. Let's talk about the gold standard creatine monohydrate. How does it actually work at the cellular level?
Creatine is the perfect example of mechanism-based supplementation. We talked at the very beginning of this deep dive about the phosphogenate energy system and how phosphocreatine acts as a molecular battery charger, rapidly donating its phosphate group to recharge dead ADP back into functional ATP.
The system that fuels the explosive 10-second sprint.
Right. Your body naturally produces a small baseline amount of creatine in the liver, and you absorb some from eating red meat. However, your intramuscular stores of phosphocreatine are typically only about 60 to 80% full naturally.
So there is unused storage capacity.
Exactly. When you supplement with 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily, you are actively supersaturating the muscle cell, filling those stores to 100%. By physically increasing the intracellular pool of phosphocreatine, you prolong the duration that the phosphagen system can operate at peak capacity.
So you can just go longer.
Instead of failing at 10 seconds, the lifter might squeeze out 12 seconds of maximal effort. It literally grants them the ability to perform 1 or 2 extra repetitions of a heavy lift. Over months of training, those extra reps accumulate into a massive mechanical stimulus, driving profound increases in muscle hypertrophy and power output.
It works because we fundamentally understand the biochemistry of the ATP cleavage. What about sodium bicarbonate? Baking soda. Sounds like a kitchen remedy, but the notes highlight it as a potent ergogenic aid.
Sodium bicarbonate operates purely on acid-base chemistry. Think back to the anaerobic glycolytic system. We established that the burning sensation and eventual muscle failure in a 400-meter sprint is caused by the rapid accumulation of highly acidic hydrogen ions dropping the muscle's pH.
Engine choking on its own exhaust.
Right. Sodium bicarbonate is highly alkaline. It's a base. When an athlete ingests a specific dose, usually 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight, about 90 minutes before an intense, short-duration event, they artificially elevate the pH and bicarbonate concentration of their blood.
They make their blood more basic.
Yes. This creates an extreme pH gradient between the highly acidic exercising muscle cell and the alkaline bloodstream. This gradient actively pulls the hydrogen ions out of the muscle fiber and into the blood much faster, where the bicarbonate instantly neutralizes them into water and carbon dioxide. You are literally buffering the metabolic acid in real time, delaying the drop in pH, and allowing the athlete to sustain their anaerobic sprint for a few precious seconds longer.
That is beautiful. It is applied cellular chemistry.
Yeah.
But you contrast the proven mechanics of creatine and bicarbonate against the list of unsubstantiated claims highlighted in Dr. Maldety's notes. Things that have been pushed for decades: bee pollen, brewer's yeast, glandular extracts, isolated kelp. People are paying top dollar for these based entirely on folklore.
It demands an unwavering commitment to critical thinking. If a manufacturer claims a new berry extract will supercharge your aerobic endurance, you have to demand the mechanism. Ask yourself, how? Does this berry extract physically increase the capillary density around my muscle fibers? Does it upregulate the DNA transcription of the CD36 fat transport proteins? Does it increase the density of my mitochondrial matrix?
Right, you need the biochemical proof.
If the company cannot explain the exact biochemical pathway through which their product alters the cellular machinery and back it up with third-party, peer-reviewed data, it is almost certainly quackery.
We have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today. We started by zooming all the way in to observe the violent, microscopic cleavage of a single ATP molecule and the intricate dance of transport proteins pulling fat across a cellular membrane. We scaled up to the macro level, mathematically defining basal metabolic rate and manipulating the physical real estate of a dinner plate to dodge the devastating hormonal collapse of RDS.
We really went everywhere.
We did. We peered into the dark, hidden ecosystem of the gut to understand how the mechanical stress of running physically alters the genetics of our intestinal toll booths, and how bacterial fermentation might just be the key to mental toughness. We examined the delicate, lethal osmotic balance of our blood plasma and why the generic hydration advice can kill you. And finally, we armed ourselves with the critical skepticism needed to navigate a supplement industry built on psychological desperation.
It truly illuminates the interdisciplinary majesty of sports science. Human performance isn't just about eating chicken and broccoli. It is endocrinology, microbiology, fluid dynamics, psychology, and acid-base chemistry, all functioning in a highly orchestrated, brilliantly adaptable symphony. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Dr. Helena Nitti and her SEMS 304 curriculum for providing the rigorous, evidence-based scaffolding to navigate this incredible landscape.
Absolutely. The depth of that curriculum is why we were able to go this deep today. But before we sign off, I know you always have something to leave us chewing on, a lingering thought to take into the rest of the week.
I do. I want to draw your attention back to our discussion on the gut microbiome and the Firmicutes bacteria. We learned that the intense physical stress of your workout causes your gut bacteria to adapt and multiply completely independently of your diet. And we learned that those newly adapted bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate.
Right, the miracle molecules.
Those fatty acids then enter your bloodstream, drastically reduce systemic inflammation, speed up your recovery, and even cross the blood-brain barrier to alter your cognitive resilience. So it raises a profoundly mind-bending philosophical question. When you wake up at 5 a.m., lace up your shoes, and go out into the freezing cold for a grueling 10-mile run, are you training your muscles to get stronger for yourself?
Oh, wow.
Or are you actually just taking your trillions of symbiotic gut bacteria out for a walk, providing them with the mechanical stress they need to thrive so that they can, in turn, make you a more efficient host?
Yeah.
Ultimately, who is really in the driver's seat of the athletic machine, you owe, or your microbiome?
Yeah. Oh, man. I am going to be obsessing over that on my next run. Am I the driver or just the very sweaty, heavily breathing biological vehicle for a microscopic colony that is manipulating my brain chemistry to keep itself alive? I love it. I want to encourage you, the listener, to take these biochemical insights into your next workout. Don't just mindlessly go through the motions. Visualize what is happening. Think about which gear your metabolic engine is in. Are you burning the newspaper of glycogen or the oak log of body fat?
Exactly. Think about the adaptations.
Think about the hormonal signaling your lunch is sending to your muscle fibers. Weigh your sweat. Train your gut. Stay hydrated, but precisely osmotically hydrated based on your own unique data. And keep digging deeper. Because when you stop viewing your body as a simple car engine and start understanding the dynamic, highly manipulable cellular economy under the hood, you stop guessing. You stop falling for the neon quackery. You truly become the master architect of your own performance. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.